Welcome everyone, Parshas VaYakel. Okay, so when people learn Parshas VaYakel, Kudi, there's something that stands out very strongly, which is that people like the exciting parshas, the stories of Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and the stories and things, and even a lot of the halachas of korbanos, which are maybe not as exciting to people reading them. It's a little easier to understand because we have to go through the laws of the korbanos. When you get to these parshas, there's something very strange, which is that it seems to repeat itself a lot. We know every single word of the Torah is, we learn out the infinite halachas from every single word. And l'chora, simply put, this whole parsha, in a certain sense, seems to be chas v'shalom mutar, like seems to be extra. It's not, of course, but we need to understand. But it's repeating what was just said back before. There's four parshas here repeating this similar things. There are some changes, some shinuyim that we learn new halachas from, the special things. But very often we have in the Torah where it says, Hashem told Moshe and v'chenasa, and that's what he did, and v'chenasu, and so they did. This whole Parshas VaYakel, much of it seems to a repeat of Parshas Truma. What was the difference? Parshas Truma, Hashem commands Moshe how to build the Mishkan, what to take the Truma, what to take the offerings from people, what to build, how to build it. And Hashem tells Moshe, that's Parshas Truma. And now in Parshas VaYakel, what happens? Moshe gathers them together and he tells them essentially what Hashem told him to command him, what to give, what to be in a no-dev, what to donate, what to make, how to make it. It's a little strange. Why? I mean, I get asked this question, but why couldn't the psukim say, and Moshe was mitzvah Klal Yisrael, everything Hashem said to him? It seemed to be. I mean, there are in halacha, for example, you can't learn out azharas, warnings against the Torah or punishments. You can't learn that. It's the same in both places. But I don't understand why here specifically we have to repeat everything Moshe said. And Hashem told Moshe, these are the things to collect, these are the things to build. And now a whole parsha where Moshe tells the Jewish people again, come, bring Zahav, Kesef, Nechoshes, build this, build that. This is how you build it. We need to understand this a little bit to whatever level we can understand why this repeating. If we can understand, let's say a svara possibly to in this very deep area, possibly to give some havana into that. Now, the way it works in this parsha in VaYakel, Moshe first tells them, as we said, first he mentions Shabbos, which we'll get to in a second. Then he tells them what to bring, the 13 things that you could bring. Zav, Kesef, Choshes. 13 things Rashi says. If you count 13 things, which 13 is a unique number. You see what that is. And then afterwards, again, it repeats to him, to the Jewish people, Moshe tells them what they have to make, the Mishkan, the Ohel. Fine, continues there. And then in Sheni, the second Aliyah, it changes a little bit than it did in Parshas Truma, because in Parshas Truma, Hashem was telling Moshe what to do. Now Moshe told the Jewish people what to do, but then in the beginning of the second Aliyah of VaYakel, it says what they did. Right now, so now it's a little different than in Truma because now it's saying our response. And now I want to point out something that I found very fascinating in this Aliyah, because now it goes through more of the individuals or the groups of people and how they responded. When you look back in Parshas Truma, Hashem says, Kol Ish. Now, Ish there means everyone, male, female, just the term for everyone. But here, it defines who did what. And you'll notice it's very fascinating, but now there's a lot of mentions of men and women. And a very different thing. This is what men brought. This is what women brought. Kol isha v'chol isha chachmas lev b'yadeh tavu, and all women who knew how to knit. I don't think the right word. Tavu. They I don't exactly how embroidering. I don't know what it's called exactly, but they made this, and every woman who had the extra wisdom, they did the izim, the special wisdom where they would spin to create the izim, the goat hair covering directly from the goats. They wouldn't take it off. They wouldn't shear the goats. It would be directly from the goats. So again, talks about the women and what they did, and the men what they did. Interesting. It mentions the Nesiim also, but here it's the divide to what people did, and specifically it mentions a lot of difference between men and women, what they did. And now there's one verse here that I find very fascinating. It's hard to read the verse. Vayavo anashim al hanoshim. Literally, the words mean the men went on top of the women. Ha'anoshim al hanoshim, and then it says, Kol Nadiv Lev, everyone who donated, they brought, and then it mentions women's jewelry. Chach, Manezim, Tabas, V'chumas, Kol Klei Zahav, which would seem to be the women's things, women's jewelry. And then it says, the Chol Ish, and every man who brought a Hinif Tnufa Zahav Lashem, and every man who brought gold. So it's a very strange pasuk, and the Mefarshim have a lot of different ways to understand this. But the words that they came anashim al hanashim, the men came, they went on the women. It's strange, and then afterwards it describes the women's jewelry, and then men also gave this gold. A lot of different explanations here. One explanation holds that why does it say on the women, because they brought the women with the jewelry on them. Different opinions. We know the women didn't want to give their jewelry to the Chet Egel, and now they did want to, and the men wanted to show, they wanted to fix it up also. But we need to understand the word. I mean, some Mefarshim say, some commentaries say, al just means im, with. We're going to look at a Balaturim and some other Mefarshim that have a little different understanding here that I want to explain this wording. What does it mean that they went on the men went on the women, this whole verse, and then women's jewelry is brought, and simply put, they're the main ones to bring the jewelry. Okay, could be that the Mefarshim say that the men gave it to them, so they needed permission to give it there, and that the men had to be there also. Whatever it is, be that as it may, but it's the women's jewelry. It's their donation. And then the men also didn't have the jewelry, seemingly, and they gave other things, broken pieces of gold, whatever it was. But we have a mentioning of women's jewelry. It's the second thing I want to sort of get into. Now, then afterwards, after they have the whole, everyone brings the donations and they start doing the work. Then it says in Perek Lamed Vav and Lamed Vav and Pasuk Hey. It says that they told Moshe, Marbi Ma'am Levi, they're bringing too much. Too much. We don't need too much. Enough. That's very weird. It says, in verse Vav, it says, and Moshe commanded by a viru kol machaneh, more he made a decree. Okay, people should not do more malacha l'trumas hakodesh. And then it repeats, Vayechaleh ha'am havi. And the people stopped doing it. Some people say it was talking about the donation. Some people say no, it's talking about the work itself, because donations may more the better. But I don't get into that right now. But it's just interesting here that we need a special statement and decree that's spread out enough. And to make it stranger, that why we need a special decree to say, like, no, okay, Torah doesn't even tell me that. I mean, just okay, they had enough, and why do we need a pasuk to tell me that they made a special decree enough? What's the significance of that? Okay, obviously they haven't had enough, and people stop bringing. But then the next pasuk in Zion's even stranger says, "V'malacha ha'isa daya." The work was enough. L'kol ha'malacha asosota. It was enough for all of the work to do. V'hoser, an extra. And Or Chaim points that's a contradiction. You can't tell me it was enough, which implies it was just enough, and then extra. What is it? It's almost it's a contradiction. You tell me it's enough, it implies good, we did enough. Then you add afterwards, and it was more than enough. You'd explain that. Okay. And the last thing I want to discuss here is something that we've discussed before, and we're going to use a similar answer, but we're going to tie it together with a lot of different things now. But everyone comments how when Hashem told Moshe to build the Mishkan, he first said, build the Mishkan. And then afterwards, he said, keep the Shabbos. But when Moshe tells Klal Yisrael in this week's Parsha, he flips it around. He first tells them, keep the Shabbos, because the building the Mishkan does not doche Shabbos. It does doche to bring the offerings, because the Shekhinah is already with us. But to build the Mishkan, no, Shabbos is not nidche, is not pushed off, and therefore he tells Shabbos first, and then the Mishkan. Why did Moshe switch it? Everyone asked that question, and we want to try to build that also into the approach we want to say. Okay, so we need to understand this, and we've talked about this many times, and this is a dvarim you're doing, things that are well known, but they're very deep and worthy to even to repeat many times. The building of the Mishkan is not building of a place. That's not what it is. Not building a place. That's not the idea. And you know that from the fact that Shabbos, we learn out the laws of Shabbos from building the Mishkan. Why do we learn the Shabbos from building the Mishkan? Well, very simple. Because Shabbos means that Kadosh Baruch Hu built the world, and Shabbos he did not. Menucha was put into the world, completion was brought into the world, Shleimus, but there was no more creative process, and that was building the world. So too, the Mishkan is building the world. And therefore, just like there are 39 malachas that, so to speak, of main categories that go into building the Mishkan, those parallel the creative acts that go into building the world. And therefore, since building the Mishkan is building this world, so as a zecher to Ma'aseh Bereishis on Shabbos, you can't build the Mishkan, you can't do the acts that were required to build the Mishkan. And that's really why we know it says, the Midrashim are full of this, obviously, we know this. It says that Hashem created the world, the Chochmah, Tvuna, V'das, and these aspects it goes through. And B'Tzalel was given Chochmah, Tvuna, and Das. The Mishkan had to be built with the same thing. And it says B'Tzalel was given the wisdom to go and to mitzdaref the osios, the words that were created. Hashem created the world. He did that in the Mishkan. If he's an architect, if he's a builder, you don't need such incredible Kabbalistic wisdom. Obviously, the point is that that's not what's happening. He has to build it in a certain structure with certain ideas and osios and kavanas to actually build a microcosm of the world. And why is that? So the answer is also very simple. We know that the original plan of the world was Hashem wanted the Shekhinah to be dwelling in the Tachtonim, in the lower worlds. And it says that every generation did another sin, and they pushed Hashem's Shekhinah's divine presence up to the seventh heaven, to the Ayin Rakiyim. And what happened was the Klal Yisrael started bringing it down. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the 7 generations to Moshe, and then the Shekhinah is now dwelling in the world again through the building of the Mishkan. And so therefore, the building of the Mishkan is exactly building the world. The world was a place Hashem's Shekhinah to reside, and the Mishkan is a literal microcosm of the world. That's also the famous Malbim. And we've said many times, the Malbim goes through the whole human body. He explains how the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, is the mind, and the two luchos there are the left brain, right brain, or cerebellum, depending on how you understand it, the two parts of the brain, and that's the luchos. And the aronos, the different parts of the aron of the ark are the krum, the membranes in the skull, and he goes through all the details. That's the Holy of Holies, and then the kodesh, the middle part, whereas the menorah, that's the candelabra, that's the bronchial tubes. He explains that whole thing. That's the second part. The heart is, and that's the central part of the person. That's called the Mishkan. Right, and then and then afterwards you come to the lower part of the body, which has the chotzer, which has the mizbeach, the altar, and that's where the food is digested, and that's the digestive process. This lower part of the body. So the Mishkan, he goes through great detail how it exactly lines up with the human being, and that makes perfect sense. Because why? Because the human being is in the model of this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. The purpose of the world was to reveal himself to the creations, meaning Adam, humanity, which is the sum total of it. So all of the Giluyim, all the revelations of all the spiritual worlds that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created are all Bitsuras Adam, right? Be careful here. It doesn't mean, obviously, we never talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu about Smusa. We don't understand Hashem. We're not allowed, to ask what's before. But the revelation, when Hashem started to create Olamos, the purpose of it was to reveal himself to the pinnacle of the creation, which was Adam. And therefore, the way we are is a microcosm of all of the spiritual world. That's exactly what it is. That's why we say a person is an olam katan, is a small miniature of the world. And that's also why the famous pasuk in Iyov, it says, from my flesh I will understand the spiritual realms. Why? Because I am built in a microcosm, in a reflection of this world and of all the worlds that Hashem created. And therefore, the idea of the Mishkan is a parallel to the human being, which is a parallel to the world and all of its intricate components. And the purpose of it is that Hashem's presence should reside in it. And that's why it says here, it's before these things, are brought in Nefesh Chaim and all the Sram Kadoshim, but it's mafurish all over the place. The Medrash says, it says that Vayar Moshe es Malacha. Moshe saw the Malacha. Medrash doesn't say Malach Mishkan. Why? When Moshe says in the Parshas, he says he saw the Malacha, it means Malacha Shemayim Aretz, Malachas Bereishis. He saw that this was the building of a world, of the world. This was the microcosm, and now Hashem's presence will be experienced in this world. Amazing, beautiful. That's also why, by the way, what I said earlier, I said it's very strange they had to make this decree and say, okay, no more, made a decree, enough is brought, don't bring more things for the Mishkan. So I forgot where I saw this. I forgot where I saw this, but I saw someone bring down once that was in lines with it says that one of the names of Hashem is Shakai. Let's say it's really Dalit, but it means it stands for Sha'amar L'Olamodai. He said to his world enough. It means the world was coming to perfection. It was expanding and expanding and expanding, and Hashem said, till here. This is where I want the world to stop. So that's exactly what happened in the Mishkan. They're giving. There has to be a point. There has to be a limitation. There has to be, we cannot handle, we need vessels. We can't handle anything that's beyond our vessel. If we try to understand things that we have no keli, no vessels to get, we can't do it. We need certain limitations. We're limited beings. So Hashem created the world and then put a limit to it. So too when they built the Mishkan, giving, expanding, it's a limitation. Now, what does it mean, vahotar? And therefore I asked the question, so what does it mean now? And there was extra. So the Sfas Emes says an amazing thing. He said this, he says that what happened was once the world was built in its format, there still has to be the conduit that Hashem's presence will fill and always come in. And that's how we connect. We connect, even though we're limited. If we connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're connecting to the infinite. We connect to everything. That's the Hoter, according to the Sfas Emes, was that they built the Mishkan, they built this Sur of the world, and it has its limitation, but it's not limited because there's a connection to the infinite, next to the Ein Sof, and that's how we draw it back in. Okay, so that is the idea of the Mishkan. But now with that, we can understand some amazing, amazing things. When we said before that they're told to bring the 13 things. Now, 13 is a very significant number. We know there are 13 midos, the Torah is learned from. We know that lines up with the 13 midos, it's going to dicta 13 acts of compassion. And we know that the numerical value of echad is 13. And without getting to things that are beyond we could talk about, but there is this dynamic of 13 expanding, being the roots, and then the emanations afterwards. So the 13 is kind of like the whole entity with its roots. And therefore, it makes sense to say that the 13 things they were giving is not a random thing, 13 things. No, they each represented the whole aspect, everything, the oneness with all its components of what a human being, his qualities that he can give. And that's mafurish. That's said in many, many places, in the sense that we know that, kesef, which is silver, is the word nechsof nechsafti, I yearn for something. So kesef, the white silver, represents love. And gold, which is fiery red, represents yira. And therefore, a person who donated gold, he had to donate a quality in himself from the 13 possible qualities, which was the quality of yira. The person who donated silver had to have the love and the desire and the white of silver, kesef, to donate that. Nechoshet is a copper, is the balance, is the middle point. So it's called Yaakov. And they had to donate that, a certain quality of truth, strength, resiliency, and everyone's unique qualities have had to be donated. And that's the Ogdayas is a very beautiful thing. He says that there is a medrash that says the Satan wanted to, so to speak, mekatreg, prosecute against the Jews, and look if really everything was theirs, they donated, nothing was stolen. Okay, so on the pshat level, it means, were the things belonging to them? Did you donate gold? Was yours, so that was yours also. But he says a very deeper understanding. He says that the Satan was claiming, when the guy donated the silver, did he really have the love of Hashem? That his part of himself, of the 13 components that can be given, that did he have that love of Hashem, that his silver should be in the Mishkan? Beautiful. And the answer was yes. That everyone donated from this deepest place in them, not just what they had, it's what they were. And that's even why the second part of the description is donate these 13 things, and then everyone come and build what you can, which is another expression of taking yourself and what your kochos are in the world, what your powers, what your strengths are in the world, your proclivities, that you now go and you're going to bring your aspect to build this world, to build the Mishkan, which is the world. Beautiful. So that is the idea of building the Mishkan. Now, we asked the question, we said, well, why do you have to repeat everything? Why we had in Parshas Truma, Hashem told Moshe, what to donate, what to build. Why do we have to have in this parsha? Moshe repeating, telling the Jews what to donate and what to build. And I like to say this is a derech efshar, because we can't say why. We can't explain why Hashem wrote in the Torah what he wrote. We know the Mishnah in Chagiga says that there are things that, parts of the Torah that are mountains hanging on thin hairs. And there are parts the Torah goes through in great detail. So, but I'd like to explain something here that is very, very crucial. We have a famous Gemara when Hashem wanted to give a Torah on Har Sinai. So it says the Malachim wanted the Torah themselves. And there's a famous Gemara there, and then Hashem tells Moshe to answer the Malachim, and he goes to the Seres Dibros and he says, were you in Mitzrayim? You weren't in Mitzrayim. You can't, get the Torah. Were you, don't commit idolatry. Do you live amongst idolaters? You commit idolatry. Well, he goes through all of the things, and the Malachim then admit that no, Moshe should have Torah. And the question's obvious. What were the Malachim thinking? Why did they think they should have Torah? So the Mefarshim say because they were talking about, we'll call it Torah's Nister, the deeper understanding of what Torah is, which means like this. It means that the Torah reveals itself in every single level. The Torah, imagine, is the connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu, V'rais Echad, Hashem is Torah one. And when if you're a malach, you're not learning the mitzvah of tefillin, how to put tefillin on because you don't have hands, but what the deeper meaning of tefillin is, that whole deeper aspect, that's the part that is relevant to you. And that's why the Malachim wanted to keep the Torah, because they understood the Torah. They couldn't do the practical things, but they understood the deeper meanings that are reflected in every part of the Torah. And the reason why Moshe won the argument was because he said, that's why in the Medrash, in the Gemara there, Hashem says to Moshe, hold the Kisei HaKavod and give him an answer. So I like to say this verse, hold the Kisei HaKavod because your neshama comes from below the Kisei HaKavod. You're on the highest level, Moshe. And then you could bring it down to the lowest level. And that's why the Malachim had to admit, yes, he should have it. He could learn the deeper reasons because his neshama is so high. But the fact that he's a bus of a dumb, he's a human being, he could bring it down into the most physical levels. So the Malachim had to agree to it. They had to say, yeah, a human being should have a Torah. But there is that deeper aspect, and it's all true. It's the famous Ramban in the Akdama to the Torah. The Ramban says that if you take all the words of the Torah and you break them up differently, you break them up not in the form that we have, it'll all be running names of Hashem. What does that mean? It means that the Torah in itself is the ultimate experience of connecting to our Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's what we call truth in the ultimate sense. How you want to phrase it? Kadosh Baruch Hu v'rais echad, and the Torah one. When it comes down to our reality, it turns and translates into words, statements, mitzvot. That's what it translates into, because that's what it is. It's not a separation, which is so crucial. That's the reason why people make the big mistake. They think that they're going to learn Kabbalah without learning the basics. You can't build a penthouse, aliyah, and upstairs without building the base. You can't, and if you build the base, you got to build the top also. It's all mikshe echad, it's all one system. Okay, so that is rule understanding of Torah. So therefore, we don't know what a Kadosh Baruch Hu, where, why, and where he decided to say this part in a hint, and this part in great detail. But it's not about what you think. It's not about what we think that it's like, okay, I need information, and now the target is, it's all there. Everything's contained in that. So what? So when you read Torah, when Hashem gives the Torah, he's giving over the osios, the letters, the words, the reality that's building and expressing the reality in the world. It's not just the question of giving facts. The letters of the Torah, we know Hashem, when he created the world, there were osios, there were letters, there were words. They create a reality. Okay, these are the building blocks of reality. Every letter is a koach, and a word puts together and creates a reality, right? Hashem said Asar Mamaros, the 10 statements, and these are the power, these are the building blocks of the reality that we have, and that is the Torah. The Torah contains in it, every single word is containing the reality of what it is, of the reality of this world. Based on that, I'd like to offer this possibility that Parshas Truma is about the building of the world through the Mishkan from the side of the Mashpia, from the side of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the side of the giver. It's Hashem commanding Moshe to build it. In Parshas VaYakel, our parsha, it's not just going to say, and so Moshe did. We're going to read the words of the Torah of what we did, because it is our building of the world through the Mishkan from the side of the receiver. It literally is. So every single os, every single letter, every single word is now us building it, but now from the side of the receiver. And that's so beautiful in terms of the wording. In Truma, in Parshas Truma, it says v'yichuli, right? The pasuk says v'yichuli Truma. How do you make the donation? So everyone says, what do you mean? It should have said v'yitnu. You give to Hashem the donation. But it doesn't. The pasuk says, "V'yichuli truma." You should take me, Hashem says, as a truma. Okay, what do you mean? Did I give you the truma? Okay, so we can say it in a simple way. That no, it's the giving is the getting. You're not going to give Hashem something he doesn't have. So by giving the truma, you are taking, so to speak, Hashem. But that's from the side of the giver. In this week's parsha, the lashon is a little different. Lashon is, the words here are, it says, Chu me'itchem truma. Take from yourself a truma. Now it's from the side of the receiver. We're building the world through the Mishkan, in the words of the Torah, as we read it in this week's Torah portion. We're building it from taking part of ourselves. Before we were taking from the Mashpia. V'yichuli, Hashem says, take me. Now, v'yichu meitchem, take from ourselves. That is what's happening. Now, let me explain that a little bit deeper, because that's what we need to understand. That it says that Zalchov in the cave of Baram, this whole world is created in the male-female dynamic. That's what it is. That's why it says the Torah, all the letters came in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, backwards to forwards, mataf, all the way to the beginning. And Hashem said, I'm responding to Torah with a base, gracious. Why? Because base is bracha. Okay, the word bracha is from base. A lot of good words and other letters too. So Maral says the bracha is not just bracha, bracha is base, is two. Meaning that the way in this world, blessing comes into this world, bracha comes into this world, is the quality of male, female. They create the child, they create the two parts come together. Yes, the luchos go with our echad. That's above. And can't achdus, we can oneness, we don't really have connection, we have connection to, but through the two sides, the male, female creating the one child, that is the unification of the two. But the bracha, the blessing comes from the male, female, the two components. Now you have to understand this, and we've discussed this before. There's an amazing statement that Leshem brings. He says that if you took all the mountains in the world and all the valleys, and you kind of put them one to the other, you see they fit exactly. Okay, the mountain fits exactly into the valleys. The world would be flat, which actually, according to I'm not an expert in geology, but I think according to I forgot the word, but when the plates of the world hit together, that's part of the idea. Also, they claim things were pushed up, things were pushed down, but that's not the point. The point is that everything that is a protrusion, that is a mashpia, that's giving out, has to fit exactly into the lacking of the valley. That's the nekeva. The word nekeva, one of the explanations is a nekev, is a hole, is a lacking. And so the mountain has to fit exactly into the lacking. And you have to understand, it's very important, because it's not like a female has a lacking and any giver can fit into that lacking. That's not correct. If you understand that they're one in the beginning, and then it's carved out the part that's the giver, then the part that's lacking is perfectly and only suited to receive from that giver that was taken out from the lacking in the first place. And that is why Saka Cohen says, and everyone says it's all over the place, that women have the greater quality of chukka, of yearning. That is their quality. And that's what the pasuk says, Elishech chukasech, to your husband is your yearning. Why? Because the way it was set up was that the female felt the lacking and yearns to be fulfilled, and the man, who is the mashpia, yearns to fulfill. And it's not the foolish people who is big, greater, better. It's just idiocy. It's echad. It's oneness. It's structured in such a way that it is perfectly fitting in to be one unit. It's one unit, which is obviously the famous, drasha, why the word natan, to give, is spelled backwards and forwards. Because when the isha yearns to be filled, and then the husband wants to fill that, the woman's receiving is called a makabel almanas liten. She's receiving because it's also giving, because she knows that's the husband's fulfillment. And when he's giving, he's getting because now he feels fulfilled. Now, based on that, so what I'm saying is that in Parshas Truma, which is mitzad mashpia, and Parshas now VaYakel is mitzad makabel. Now it's very beautiful why the psukim here, after it describes what Moshe told them to do, and then it describes what they did. All of a sudden, the males, females, it keeps talking about the different qualities that each one presents. The women, and they had ekel chochma, and the strange verse we said that they went anoshim ala noshim, the men on the women. So according to one parish, is the women were the main givers. Term says that they're the main givers there, and therefore that's the language that they gave, that they went on top of the women, meaning the women were really the central ones, which makes perfect sense to what we're saying, because there in this parsha now is from the side of the chukka, the yearning to receive the building of the world. So Hashem wants us to give, He wants us to build the world, He wants to be mashpia, and now we want to receive it. So we have to read the parsha to be able to be the vessel to receive it. But the yearning, if there's no yearning, if there's no Isra Usul Tata, there's no yearning from below, you have a problem. You can't get it from above because you have no vessel to hold it. And that's why even the Sfas Emes, he doesn't learn that the women's giving was in any way superior. He doesn't learn like that. He learned in a certain way the opposite. But according to what we're saying, it's really still Hai Nohach. It's still the same thing. The Sfas Emes says when it means the men over the women, he says in a certain way the men's giving was greater than the women because they were now Balei Tshuva. Because the women never did the sin of the golden calf. So they therefore technically didn't have to donate to the Mishkan. They still wanted to, they still did, which is incredible greatness. But the men who had the lacking from their perspective, because they did the sin, they yearned, and according to the Sfas Emes, they were the ones who were the central givers, because they had taken the female position. They take a female role. They were now in the place of yearning to fix up. They were in the position of the Baal Tshuva. And that's always true. It's not about male or female. That's why we say we, Klal Yisrael, are the female. We are the ones that receive Makadosh Baruch Hu. And it's always true like that. I mean, a woman receives from the husband, and then she is the mashpia to the children. That's the way the world is. And that also explains the last part. Why Moshe switched Shabbos before Mishkan. So the Mefarshim say that building the Mishkan is a tribute to the Jewish people, as the Shekhinah resides amongst them. And Shabbos is a tribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he created the world in 6 days. So from Hashem's point of view, where he wants to emphasize the Jewish people, he says the Mishkan first, which is the covenant of Klal Yisrael, right? Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, that's what Hashem says. Who is like the Jewish people? And then he says Shabbos. But from the Jewish people's perspective, as the Makabah, we have to switch it around. We want to receive for the purpose of giving. So therefore, we have to say first Shabbos, Hashem's honor, and then Mishkan. That is the power of this parsha, and this comes into everything in our lives. You have to realize that the quality of Zachar and Akeva is a quality of oneness, and we take on the different roles different times in our lives. From Kadosh Baruch Hu's point of view, we have to have the tshuka yearning to receive, and even to think that. As the Nefesh HaChaim brings in Hilchos in Shar Beis, which about Tefillah, he says to even think when you want something, you're asking Hashem, I want it, to think that He wants to give it to us even more than we know. So it becomes a asking to receive, which is in a certain sense the idea of also of giving, and this is how he explains the idea of some praying for the tsar of the Shekhinah, that your parent, your spouse, they want to give you more than anything, but you're not doing things to allow it. So I want to get it, but I also want to get it, switching the role, because I realize in this love relationship, you want to give it to me. And that's true for all of our relationships. When a husband and a wife, parent and a child, and we become receivers and we become givers. And we have to understand that it's a wholeness, but sometimes people take advantage of it, and it's a mistake, because it's why when you're giving to someone, you need to keep their covered, because when you don't give to them in a way that you become really one with them, it's like I'm so smart, so brilliant, I don't need anything from you. Then what you do is that it's not a unification of the relationship. It's denigrating. And therefore, in every role of our lives, you have to realize the world was created with these aspects. Hashem relates to us that way. We have to relate to other people also. When we're givers, we got to give them in a proper way that they feel this is a mutual dynamic. When we're receivers, we have to do the same thing. And when we do that, we really miyached, we really unify our relationship, and that way build the Mishkan and unify the whole world. All the best.